Grace and peace and spoiler alert for the movie Palm Springs. My name's Ryan, and I'm the MOVIEPASStor. What I do is I watch movies and I think theologically about them. You can think theologically about the movies too, to find Jesus in whatever you are seeing around you. Palm Springs is a Hulu original movie, so I got to watch that in the midst of this pandemic when the movie theaters are closed, and I had a really wonderful time enjoying what is sort of a spiritual successor to Groundhog Day. And I'll say this, I'll use this word. It might be blasphemy against Groundhog Day, but better. It's better. I'm sorry, Bill Murray, you're great, but Andy Samberg, man, it worked. So they take all of the discussions in Groundhog Day, and Groundhog Day is already dealing with some kind of deep stuff, right? Like meaning of life and purpose and eternality type, cursed by a higher power oriented stuff. And they really dial it up to the next level by creating a character who has been in a time loop for so long at this wedding in Palm Springs that he no longer wants out. He, at the start of the movie, he is content with his lot and starts to ask, I think, a really meaningful question of why, right? When an opportunity presents itself for him to leave, should we, like, or maybe if we know that's there, should we hang out? Which, man, comes off as like a really good question, right? Because how tempted would you be to stay in that Groundhog Day scenario? How many of us who viewed Groundhog Day have kind of felt like Bill Murray's character was just too grumpy to really appreciate everything about, and it made sense that once he became ungrumpy, he got out, because if you ever were like Andy Samberg's character, you weren't grumpy about it, you were ready for it. It's kind of almost too much of a reward rather than a punishment. It becomes an opportunity to be free from death, to be free from fear, to be free from consequences. I'm an overeater. That's my major vice. And so to think that you don't gain weight for what you ate yesterday, you don't suffer for that. There's actually a lot going on in the discussion of, do I want to be living in a real world? Because for the expense, for the reward of not having to suffer any consequences, you also don't get to have any influence. You don't get to interact with the real world. You don't get to make a difference in any important ways. And the movie does not shy away from this. I mean, this isn't stuff that I'm putting on the movie. There is actual dialogue that addresses it. And so when Andy goes and he visits J. Jonah Jameson and he says, hey, this is the situation. I kind of want to bury the hatchet. I'm sorry for locking you here. There's this discussion, and it like resonates with me so deeply because I grew up in Irvine, California, and he's in Irvine. And he says, you need to find your Irvine. I mean, whatever it is that's going on, whatever's happening here, it's beautiful. And so the advice, one of the philosophies presented in the movie is to find beauty in the mundane, to learn to be content with your lot in life, to bloom where you're planted, and to not strive and to not just rake yourself over the coals to try to accomplish some new and greater and more fabulous thing, but rather to find your Irvine, to like go to the kind of colorless upper middle class suburb and stay there. That's as good as it gets. But even though in the dialogue of the movie that's kind of where they send you, I would argue that the movie itself then counters that and speaks to something else, speaks to the possibility that life outside of the cycle, life outside of the rat race, life outside of the time loop is worth living. And yet, like a good piece of art, it disturbs. It doesn't spoon feed that to you either. And I think if it did, we would reject it, like a toddler does when you try to spoon feed it half the time. What it instead gives us is this character, the mother, who is Andy's Irvine, is his right way to live life, is his most important, most beautiful, most simple desire. He chooses to follow after that, even out of eternal life, follow after that, even out of freedom from fear of death. Well, that of course makes me ask the question of Jesus, right? Is Jesus that thing that can be your Irvine? Is the church this broken, disastrous institution that is so often behind the times and boring and sometimes on the wrong side of history with social issues? Is it enough? And can we sit here with that? Or are we doing it? Are we choosing it because it promises us this ticket? Because it promises us this freedom from consequences? Because it promises us this eternal life? Is it possible that following Jesus could be an adventure into the unknown, into the possibility of having a positive influence on the world, instead of just being a tool for us to reduce or negate our negative influences? Or is that just not something that's available to us? Well, I've learned from Palm Springs, I'm not going to spoon feed you the answer, but I hope you hit me with some comments below and we engage it, because that certainly ain't nothing as far as theological conversations are concerned. Thank you for being with us, and I will see you next time on MOVIEPASStor.
And when in scenes of glory I sing